back. This is Black Thought. I'm your host, Dr. Hutchinson. And what you just saw was a snippet of some thoughts from T.D. Jakes concerning entrepreneurship. So the first thing that's cited here in the article is transforming black buying power into black wealth. And so what you have here are two sides of this economic piece. The first side in this article suggests that the church ought to support Buy Black campaigns and also should spend 10%, tithe, so to speak, of their weekly expenditures with black-owned business and invest another small percentage in life insurance or other similar investment instruments. The economic and political power created by the community would transform it also immediately. That's one side of it. T.D. Jakes showed you the other side, which is going into business for yourself and producing rather than consuming. So let me do this. I'm going to get out the way. We're going to rotate in the opposite way this time. So great Dr. Fisher, would you expound on this a little bit for us?
Yeah, man, I want to try to add some perspective to it, and the statement that I want to start with is going to sound oxymoronic, but let me try to explain it. I think I agree with it in practice, but not in theory, because the practice of it is for us to empower people in such a way that we can keep money going into our own communities and neighborhoods to embody what is called one of the principles of blackness, is cooperative economics. I think that that's cool, but I think what we may be missing, and this is where I think the black church has fallen as we have started to emerge as a more corporate entity than we are a ministerial entity. So we're not even dealing necessarily with the matters of consumption, because now we're just switching who we are consuming. We want to consume our own stuff. Well, I think entrepreneurship ought to be based upon a certain type of service mentality. So what are we producing that is going to uplift and serve the people who are in need? But that's not the premise that I think is being offered. So I can agree with the practice, but I don't know if I can support the theory, because what has happened in the black church is we have allowed our ministerial ethic to be compromised by our business ethic. So we understand that there is a business ethic in the church where the church has to be about some type of money and monetary advancement. And we may look at that as wealth, or we may look at that just as simply riches. But the prosperity gospel has painted us in such a way that we think we can get a breakthrough and an advancement, and only thing we have to do is name it and claim it.
All right, let me step in real quick. I just want to clarify what you said and make it real simplistic for some who are watching. So bottom line of what you said, you agree in practice but not in theory, because all money ain't good money. Is that basically what you said?
Yeah, for the most part, yeah. Let me try to recapitulate it like this. We need to be mindful of just changing the color of the people who oppress and manipulate our people.
I agree 1,000% with you. All right, let me pass it to Dr. Johnson. Go right ahead.
Well, I don't want to make the mistake of doing an either or. It's a both and. Mm-hmm. We need businesses, and I've been teaching now for the last, I know, roughly 8 years, that the next great move of the church, and the black church in particular, is job creation. I mean, we have to be able to create jobs and opportunities for people to work. There are a lot of people within our own communities who cannot work certain jobs. And the black church and the church particularly can help that out. But I don't want to go too far. So both and, because we also need people that are working and people who will consume from these businesses that these businesses that are going to pop up, because without any customers, and this is what we're seeing in this season of austerity right now. Without any customers, you're not going to make the profit margins or have the businesses in order to then hold the businesses accountable within the community to give back unto the community. If the businesses are suffering along with the people are suffering, then you're just going to have groups of suffering people within the community. Which brings me to my larger point, in which T.D. Jakes, bless his heart, left out. The reason why he's pushing for more entrepreneurship in businesses, which I can understand, he understands that as a higher income type of model. What the black church should be doing as well, both and, is talking about higher wages, talking about jobs that can actually support families, talking about when women are still making 77 cents on every dollar. Now single woman head of households become problematic because you're already 23 cents short on the dollar that you're making.
That's it.
So here, these are the issues that need to be addressed, and it can be addressed and have been addressed historically through the black church. And just because people are now trying to shy away from it because everybody's in this season of austerity, we got to learn how to do more with less and all of that, we have to be theologically sound when we say this, when we say that we respect workers, we respect the people that are coming to spend money with us. That is a biblical principle as well. That is a Christian principle, and we ought to respect them. We ought to respect the business owner, and we ought to support her and her business efforts. We should support both and it shouldn't be this either or model. And I don't want us to fall into the DeBosian Booker T. Washington model.
We actually need both of them.
Both things.
We need the talented 10th, and we need the persons to be able to pull up and anchor yourself where you are.
And
we need both of them.
I'm glad you brought that up real quick. We also need professionals in the skills and the trades. We need plumbers. We need electricians.
Exactly.
We need folk who can fix roofs and build buildings. If I got a problem at home with plumbing, look, after the plunger, I'm through. I have to call somebody. Right. That's about all I can do. If it's not happening, if Drano can't cure it, I'm picking up the phone and calling somebody. And it would be nice to be able to call somebody that I know, that I trust, that I respect, and that's a part of the community. That would, again, give back to the community, or even, some of the young people in the church that would say, hey, won't you apprentice with me this summer, and so on and so forth. So yes, you can do that, but you need consumers, you need people with good paying jobs that are able, as Janae and I was talking at the break, that could actually pay for the business services that you're offering.
All right, now let me let my great sister to jump in. I'm ready to hear what you have to say after hearing these two theologues wax eloquent.
It's
come and help us out.
Actually, Andre just stole my thunder. Because as I was coming into the studio this morning, I was listening to my YouVersion Bible. I was listening to Exodus 36. And in Exodus 36, God tells Moses that God has instilled in certain individuals in the camp gifts and skills to be able to fashion special types of stone, and to be able to fashion special types of metal, and then also to be able to embroider and to sew the special garments that God wanted to be in the temple. And God said to Moses that I have gifted them to be able to do these things just as I have commanded you. And I started thinking about how there are so many gifts that God gives us that we sit on. That there are people in our congregations who have the ability, as you said, to build buildings, to carve stone, to embroider. It's so funny how many times we get ready to remodel our church facility, right? And there are people inside our congregations who probably have the skill set to be able to build a pulpit, or to be able to build lecterns, or who may have the ability to sew draperies and things of that nature. And when you talk about this is what I support about what T.D. Jakes says. He talks about being producers. So what ends up happening is the black church becomes a consumer instead of the black church being a producer. That we have gifts and abilities inside our congregations, if we but first of all look for them, and secondly develop them, that we have the ability to be able to produce our own I won't say produce our own, but we have the ability to produce our the things that we need, given the gifts and abilities that are inside our churches. So that's one. But number two, when you talk about we need people to be able to buy goods and services, one of my critiques of black business is that oftentimes black entrepreneurs do not have competitive business models. So what happens is either my quality is poor or I'm overpriced. And so what ends up happening is the people who I need to support my business are the people who are really, who are, I don't want to say, who are in essence doing me a favor, if you will. The people who have a relationship with, and the people who are, saying, hey, go support them, so go support this business. But my business model may not necessarily be competitive, either because my product is not of the quality that can compete with mainstream products, or because the price that I have is higher than the price that is in the mainstream market. Right. Or it's when individuals come to my business, it's not clean, it is not welcoming to a customer. My customer service is poor, and so as a result, we want to say to the black church, it's your responsibility, in order, to invest in black business, but the black church also has a responsibility to ensure that our money is used in a manner where it's good stewardship. But we also have the responsibility to say to our parishioners and to say to our community members, hey, listen, when I come into your business, it needs to be clean. Right. When I come into your business, you need to have good customer service, because it's not right to expect someone to buy from you just because you're black.
Right. No, I agree with that.
We should be supporting your business because you are a good business owner, because you because you have a product that I need, and it's a product that I can afford.
But now let me step in here real quick. Couple of things. First of all, I agree with you. Now, in terms of the cost versus the quality, you might not, as a small business owner, be able to address the cost piece. So your cost may be more because you can't get the wholesale price to produce your product, but you can have control over the quality. Now that's in your ballpark to control. You can make sure that the business is clean. You can make sure that there's cut. So there are things that can happen. I think, to also push the critique the other way, we tend to give other people's business the benefit of the doubt when we don't give that to our own. Now, I'm separating that from the brother man hook up, do business with me because I'm black. I'm looking at it from the standpoint of, I go into your store and I'm disappointed the first time, whereas I'll go into Best Buy. I'm just naming them. I'm just saying. I might be disappointed the first time, but I might go back the second time. But I might not give you a chance after that first time.
And you don't swear off all black business.
That's right.
All the Best Buy business. So
that's right.
And that's the only thing I was going to say. You took the first part about the cost and all of that. But what typically happens then, so if I get a bad experience, just like with church. Somebody have a bad experience with church, they swear off all churches. You just don't say, okay, maybe that church is not for me, I'm gonna go somewhere else. We will go to I'll just say a restaurant, maybe a restaurant that's white owned, and we get lousy service. And like you just said, we may go back. We may go back again, and maybe even a third time. But what we don't do, or even if we don't go back there, we don't swear off going out to eat. We'll go somewhere else. We'll do something else. With a black business, we get that bad. We will lump black businesses all together.
And that's not right.
You got Reverend Janae's business that's doing super in all the areas, but because I had a bad experience over here, you get lumped in, and you're like, wait a minute, I'm busting my butt here, I'm doing this. So we have to be careful if we're going to talk about business, and this goes for anything. Once again, as I said earlier, it's the problem with blackness. If it's black, it has to be a taint. It has to be, as Henry McNeil Turner said, it has to be something wrong. It's a spot. It's a blemish. It's something wrong just because of that. And it's as if that black businesses, black people, black entrepreneurs, anything black or blackness itself cannot just stand on its own merit. It has to be lumped in all together.
Yes, and a lot of that is due to, I hate to say it, the brainwashing that many of us have been subjected to. I'll give you an example. On social media, I saw somebody talking about the VIP section in churches. And in this scroll, one person said that all black churches have a VIP section. Well, maybe my church didn't get the news, because we never had a VIP section. I've been over where you are, no VIP section. I've been over where you were, where you are, no VIP section. I've been over at Abyssinian, no VIP section. Every church.
Where's that VIP section? We're not worthy enough.
Wait a minute. Quiet on the set. Where's your VIP section, brother?
No, obviously I was teasing. I mean, you all know I out of the pulpit because I didn't want to communicate the same type of hierarchy that's communicated.
No, I get you, but see, and let me get more specific. What they were talking about, there are some churches, and it's primarily in the western part of our country. There are some churches, and even in other places, and it's mainly mega churches, but most of them don't do this. Where you have a section, if you have a church that has a lot of celebrities, they'll set up a section for them to sit. So they can come in, sit down, go out. But probably 98% of our churches don't have this, won't have this. So when people see this, they want to lump everything together. And I think that's detrimental, because everybody's not alike. Even though I respect the three persons that are on this show, we don't all think alike. We don't all agree on the same thing. So that's just the reality of the situation. But now let me steer this and kind of bring it to the article. The article states, and I have issues right here. They talked about the black church supporting black businesses, and then the next thing is invest tithes and offerings in the black-owned businesses. So now I want to kind of frame this way. Now, this is one of the biggest open secrets there is. Most churches struggle with raising money.
Preach right there.
And see, we think that it's the small church that struggles with raising money. I could name, I won't, but I could name 3 mega churches right here in Memphis that are living hand to mouth right now. To the point where with one of them, I happened to talk to one of the persons that used to do business with a particular church, and they said they had to stop doing business with them because they couldn't pay their bills. And if I name this church, y'all would be shocked. I was getting ready to say something ugly. My name is not, but I won't go there. But anyway, the point I'm making is the person that wrote this article may not be anchored in the church, or may be one of those persons that critique the church without understanding the mechanics of the church and the dynamics of the church. Most churches can't afford to give away tithes and offerings to support black business per se. But to get back to something that both of you all said, what churches can do is start to help to support their own by sharing the vendors, working with vendors, and supporting those businesses. For example, how many black churches have an active account with a black bank? That's a real simple way to do it. How many black churches, use black vendors, use black plumbers, use black construction persons, use black janitorial services, the supplies in the janitorial supplies in the church. Those are practical things that any church can do. I'm going to give you an example. It was told to me, and I won't name this church either. I'm protecting the guilty today. It was told to me that a major church in this area a white church, was getting ready to put up their building. When they were in the process of putting up their building, they had a meeting. They said, we want to see all the contractors, all the vendors, all the people that do X, Y, Z in this church to meet us in room 305 after service. When they got to the room, they gave them a brochure and say, we are bidding for these jobs when we put up our new sanctuary. And here are the qualifications that you will need. We want you to bid for this job, and if you meet the qualifications, since you are a member of this church, you will get first priority. That's investing back in your community. And those are some of the things that any church can do right now. Not to brag, but First Baptist, we work with black vendors. We've even said that if we bid out the work and the black vendor comes 10% above, any other bid, if he has the same quality, we're going to go with him because we're going to support on. Go ahead, Earle.
Yeah, I wanted to say, I think that is a byproduct of the social stigma. I think Andre said something to this that's been floating around in the conversation already, this notion of white is right and black is whack. Right. So what we end up having is a certain type of scarcity principle that the black church operates out of, so that we don't ever think there's going to be enough, in part because we're trying to become the church like Walmart. So we are stretching our funds out and being poor stewards over that which we already have, when it seems like many prominent and, dare I say, white churches seem to operate out of a prosperity principle where they feel like there'll always be more than enough. So now you don't have to operate out of the same level of angst and anxiety that leads you to lose your creativity. And that's one of the things that the black church is lacking in the 21st century. So the reason that the black church is dying in many ways is because we don't have any creativity anymore. So we feel like we have to pigeonhole and keep doing things the same way we have been doing them, when it seems like that may be what is holding our purse strings tight anyway.
Well, let me tag to what you just said and take us to another thing that this article said that can tie in some ways to what you said. It says, reestablish itself as the moral authority of the black community. Mm-hmm. One of the reasons why I'm piggybacking on what you said is it seems like now what we see happening and what people are pushing for, and when I say people, it seems to be a lot of people outside of the church that want to come in the church. They want the church to mirror the society. And in some ways, the church cannot mirror the society. You can't have twerking contests in church. You just can't. You can't offer scholarships to the best. Shut up. I heard that. I know that's impolite, y'all, but he made a joke. I heard it. I want to repeat it, but I can't. But anyway, getting serious. You can't offer scholarships for the best twerker in church.
Can Juicy J come to First Baptist on Lauderdale?
Juicy J can come to the church, but he got to leave the twerking contest outside the door. So I know I'm being a little crazy, but I'm doing it on purpose because we tend to try to syncretize some practices in the church that just don't fit. And then we wonder why we don't get the respect that we used to get. That's because we have abdicated our moral authority. And then it doesn't help when you have scandal after scandal after scandal of preachers, and people don't understand the fact that for every scandalous preacher you might find, there are thousands that are doing the right thing.
Right.
Y'all talk to me about that.
I mean, and another thing that we have to do when I hear those type of arguments, like point 3, the moral, get back to the moral high ground, then I am challenged to see what would morality look like in 2013. and what are the pressing issues and problems that we are facing as a community, as just people living here in America. In the 1950s, it was totally different. And before that, it was totally different. Now, you also got to look at that the church is not the only game, quote unquote, in town now.
Exactly.
So there are a multiplicity of different thoughts, different ways of addressing certain issues, different things that people will say. So and what is another, like you mentioned the dirty little secrets. I'll tell you another one, that the majority of African Americans in this country are not worshiping at church. They are not going to church. And when I say that at seminary, people get, like, wow, because we are around church folk. We think that every black person goes. I just say, think about your family. I say, you're preachers and your family members won't even come to your church. So some of your family members. So there are different thoughts, there are different ideas, different religions. There is a rise now in atheism in the black community, people, a free thought persuasion. So we got to take all of that into consideration. But what are the moral principles that I think the black church can stand on? Well, I'm so glad you asked. Number one, economic inequality. Number two, the prison industrial complex. I would love to see the African American black church stand up on the prison industrial complex, low wages, the economic disparities, mental health issues, gun violence, all of these type of morality that are not focused on piety issues. We're good at that. We don't take care of piety, the individual, twerking and all of that. But where the black church stands publicly, where we draw back from and where we think what we think about the black church is where it stood publicly in its public theology. Its public theology was what carried the day, and we have to get back to the public theology and dare I even use the word prophetic, even a prophetic theology.
Well, look,
that speaks
if I can, let me push back on my homie just a little bit. I don't think that the black church has ever stopped proclaiming a public theology. It's just that the public theology it has been proclaiming, or at least started to proclaim, has been shallow and hypocritical, which is part of the reason why the black church has lost its prophetic potency. So it's not that we're not saying anything in public. It's just that since the black church was established in the mid of the 20th century as a place where people could get social status, that social status was tied to a mythical standard of piety. That's why we started to promote this notion of holiness in the extreme sense of the term as we have, and now we know we can't live up to it. So now we have some of the scandals and some of the improprieties that have become more public on behalf of the black church, and then we've lost that potency. But I do agree with you definitely, Dre. We agree on this, that the church does need to reclaim the prophetic mantle, and it should be speaking to the issues that you have just brought up. So that's one of the reasons why I celebrate everybody who's on the panel today, because as far as I know, all of the brothers and the sister that are standing on the panel do take heed to social justice issues and try to make it an intricate part of our ministry.
Oh yeah, before we go to our Janae, let me jump in here because you said a bunch of great things, both of you. And one of the things is when our ministry is tied to our theology, which you have so succinctly said. And when we get back to having a communal theology, that's when we're going to have a greater prophetic voice, because the prosperity gospel lends itself to individualistic theology, which is not beneficial. Second, we really, and I know Bishop William Young has been one of the local and national proponents of this. We really need to deal with this mental health piece. I remember, and I'm old enough to remember, when you didn't hear about black snipers. When you heard a sniper, you knew the sniper didn't look like us. But now you see all kind of things happening. We're going into the Navy Yard, shooting people up. We're driving cars because of postpartum depression and trying to run into the Capitol. We are not dealing with really an epidemic. We have a health emergency in our neighborhoods, which this speaks to, but I want to stay here for right now because I didn't give you a chance to speak. So go ahead and jump in.
Actually, I want to jump on the mental health aspect because we undervalue the importance of mental well-being. Mm-hmm. And we have dismissed therapists, psychiatrists, and psychologists as a valuable part of our community. Mm-hmm. We will go to the doctor and we'll get medications for our physical health, but we won't treat our mental stability and our mental well-being with the same level of importance. And so, and this is a huge generalization, but in the Black community, there's a stigma about getting counseling. In the Black community, there's a stigma about needing some inpatient care, 2 or 3 days to be on suicide watch because you're having thoughts that are unnatural or thoughts that are different. And so I think we do our communities a disservice, particularly in the Black church, by saying or by almost positioning therapists and psychiatrists and psychologists as an unnecessary part to the Christian life. Having a good therapist and a good counselor is valuable. Yeah. Having a prayer life is valuable. Having a consistent, Christian discipline is valuable. But there are moments in our lives when we must pursue professional help. We've got kids who would benefit a great deal by having a regular visit, sitting on somebody's sofa and being able to talk about problems and situations. So for me, while I think that economic empowerment and economic vitality is a very important part of the Black community and a very important part for the Black church to address, just as important, I think, is the role the Black church needs to play in mental health for our community. We have too many people walking on the streets who need mental attention.
But let me jump in. I know Earle wants to. Earle, hold on a second, because I'm gonna let you come in right after. But now, I want to just frame this for the audience, because we think of mental health as people losing it, as people doing irrational things. But we also have to look at mental health from the perspective of young 13-year-old boys being able to shoot somebody and kill them without even thinking about it. That's also an aspect of mental health. So we talk about what's happening in Chicago, that's a part of mental health. We talk about some of the crazy stuff we see happening in Memphis and all over this nation. Newark is almost as bad as Chicago. People are shooting, they have a murder a day in to some respect in Newark right now. All of that ties into mental health. Go right ahead, Earle.
Yeah, man, and I love to hear pastors and preachers talk about the realities of mental health, because it shows that at least these people who are having this conversation have a broader theology that seems to be more broader than what's prevalent in the Black church. My wife is a social worker, so she works in the mental health field, which is probably one of the reasons I'm still sane now, right?
Oh, you are? But go ahead.
We have thought that the answer to mental health issues prior to the expansion of our contemporary theology was simply pray about it. So I want to stress this point, one of the points that I've been trying to make in many different platforms and places. The problem that the Black church has in the 21st century is a theology problem. Our God is just too small. So until we can expand the way we see God and say that God is at work, even in mental health professionals, I would love for every church to, at least, especially if they have the resources to do it, to employ a mental health professional, so that when our pastoral and ministerial prayers and counseling does not work, we can refer somebody to a mental health professional.
Well, let me reframe the last piece of what you said. It's not so much that it doesn't work, but that it needs additional augmentation. But go ahead.
Right, exactly that. Is that in and of itself, with the complexity of the problems that our people face, mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally, we need as many hands on deck as possible in the name of Jesus.
Go right ahead.
And I just want to add on this when we talk about mental health issues, and this is what I'm talking about, what morality looks like in 2013. Morality means to have a substantial, or at least addressing the best way you possibly can mental health issues. But let us be real here for a moment. It's not only the black church that struggled with mental health. In this country, we struggle with mental health issues. We just don't do mental health well, period, in this country. Any mental health professional would tell you that more funding is needed, more therapists are needed. What are we close hospitals that could help people with mental health issues. We don't even have adequate housing. The homeless problem in this city could be eradicated by 50% if we just had homes or just places where many of the homeless can just take their meds regularly. Regularly taking your medications will have you functioning in this society. Half of that would be just eradicated, but we just don't have the facilities. We as a society don't do mental health well at all. And part of the black church's theology and public witness should be, listen, let's do something about this issue that is profoundly affecting people in our communities, but also profoundly affecting all Americans across the spectrum.
But now let me jump in and raise a danger zone, so to speak, because it's controversial. The whole piece of sexuality. And I'm not necessarily bringing it up in terms of whether, you know, who your partner should be, but I'm bringing it up in terms of what really should be a national emergency, HIV and AIDS, you know, and STDs, because STDs are on the rise, and that's on the rise to the point where you're having STDs that penicillin can't do anything with. They don't really have medicine for it.
Are you telling me then that what we have been preaching and teaching, our abstinence programs,
just that, Reverend, it's not working.
Well,
not working.
Just say no.
I'm shocked.
Now, wait a minute. See, now these sarcastic preachers.
This is where you're in trouble. Because there used to be a time when we could preach about purity, and 90%, I'm really overgeneralized, but 80% of the congregation could understand and get you on purity. These days, purity simply means I haven't slept with more than 20 people. But I mean, in the grand scheme of things, the idea of abstinence is a myth amongst adolescents, amongst teenagers,
but wait a minute,
and especially
preacher.
amongst young adults.
Wait a minute, preacher. I need to push back on some of what you said. Ever since the Lord said, "Be fruitful and multiply," folk been trying to do that. So, I mean, in you know, they've been trying to know each other in a biblical sense, right? So,
and I want to add to that when the text in Genesis chapter 1, 26 and 27 says, "Be fruitful and multiply," technically nobody's married yet. So who is the Lord talking to?
Now see, you trying to take us to another place. I ain't mad. I'm not mad. Now see, you got me speaking in colloquialism, but you got my point, which is we've always had out of wedlock births. We've always been sleeping around, maybe not as pervasive as now, which is part of your point, but this has always existed. But we've handled it differently, you know, maybe, and I'm not saying we always handle it in healthy ways, but maybe your aunt was really your mama, or you know how we do, you know, so you understand that. But we're at the point now where we got to cut out some of the pretense. So in other words, getting to part of your sarcasm, you kind of beat me to the punch. You should be you should practice abstinence. But if you don't, and you find yourself, now that's real. You find yourself in a situation, here is what's called the condom.
But this is what happens.
You need to I need to say this. You need to use this. You need to use this to protect yourself. And we need to give some of that to, and I'm gonna make some folk mad. We need to give some of that to some of you old folk who say you can't make anybody pregnant anymore, and you out here running, and then you get into something you can't give back. But we don't want to talk about that. Go right ahead.
That is exactly my point. So what happens is, in the church, and again, I'm overgeneralizing. When we begin to talk about sex, sexuality, and purity, it is always in the context of abstinence, which is a model that is outdated. It is a model that does not have present day relevance. And then you are speaking to a generation of people who are saying, be serious. There are 8th graders and 7th graders who have orgies in middle school bathrooms. So when preacher wants to get up in the pulpit on Sunday morning and talk about just say no, your 8th grader is having more sex than mom and daddy in the bedroom down the street or, down the hallway. So in the context of this whole conversation about sex, sexuality, abstinence, protection, prevention, the conversation has to get real and the conversation has to get honest. As a church, we have covered up and we've been too timid to have real conversations with the most vulnerable in our community. Our young people, they are the most vulnerable. And so what happens is we ostracize the 13-year-old girl who gets pregnant, right? And we ostracize her, not realizing that before she got pregnant, she already had gonorrhea, syphilis, chlamydia, and a whole host of other diseases, which makes it a public health matter because she's also sexually active with more than one young man who's sexually active with more than one young woman or more than one young man. And so they share each other and they share diseases, and in a real unfortunate case, they're sitting in our pews and we act like they don't exist.
But here's
let's talk about the genderized hypocrisy. Part of the reason I think the sexuality conversation is so shallow is because it brings up this notion of male privilege that functions very highly in the black church. So we would condemn and criticize the young sister, so she has to get up in front of the congregation and ask for forgiveness, but the pastor that she's been sleeping with, or the musician that she was sleeping with, or the choir member that she was sleeping with, or the deacon that she was sleeping with, none of them have to get up and confess and ask for their sins to be forgiven because there's a double standard at work in the black church. So part of the reason we want to talk about sexuality in a more broad sense is because we're trying to hold on to black male privilege.
And I think what we've done to address some of what you just said is not healthy. In other words, instead, and you kind of made the point, instead of addressing the whole situation, we address none of it because it'd be too dangerous to address. I'm going to tell you something I did. I was the chaplain for a short period of time at Lemoyne-Owen College, and during one of the chapels, I started talking to the young people because basically the freshman seminar was in the chapel. So I started talking to them and I said, now let me talk to you about how you share your bodies, because you got to understand that when you share your body, you make a connection with someone. And so what happens is when you don't understand that, you see somebody, you're attracted to them, you get together with them. You don't find out what they're about, you don't ask them, or find out what type of person they are, but because you're attracted to them and your hormones are raging, you connect with them. So then after a while, you start cutting class. You start finding time where you can connect with them in that way. Have sex. Let's just be plain, right? You keep doing that. And then you find out that you have nothing in common with them except having sex. And you want to get away from them, but you see you can't. So you keep having sex with somebody you can't stand, and you can't figure out why you can't shake them loose. That's because y'all have made a connection. So then when you disconnect from them, you rip the fabric of yourself. You leave pieces of yourself everywhere. And then you can't understand why you have problems connecting to people you want to connect to. That's because you're everywhere. And this goes for men as well as women. You're everywhere. So you don't understand how your sexuality is tied into your being. You just see it as an act. You just see it as a function, just like going to the bathroom. That's why 8th graders can have orgies in the middle school bathroom, because they see it as a function. That's why some of them can say, all right, I might get pregnant, I might get diseases. Let's look at the 8th grader's mind. So instead of letting this boy have sex with me, I'll give him oral sex. And I'll be good at that. so that I could attract attention. Not knowing you still can get diseases, and then that's a whole nother spin that's affecting your mind. And we have not done a good job, and I have to raise my hand and say I'm guilty too, of addressing some of this in the church. And it's addressable. But I think too, because we've not done it, our young people are afraid to come to us with some of this stuff because they're afraid of judgment. And that's because also, to kind of get to Earle's point, we put ourselves on these pedestals and we've not let people know that we were misters and misses before we were reverends and saved. And some of these mistakes they've made, we've made. So we're not real enough to put it out there so that we can help them.
And I would also add that we have this cloak of secrecy sometimes in the black church, where we don't want to talk in public or talk out loud about some of the real harshness. I mean, the things that happen in our bedrooms. We're pretty secretive about those types of things, and it would really be to our benefit if not only those of us who stand in the pulpit to proclaim about it, but those who are in the audience who sometimes give you pushback and say, Pastor, don't talk about that in church. Reverend, don't talk, we don't come to church to hear you talk to us about how to manage our bedrooms. We don't come to church to hear you talk to us about what they're doing in high schools or in middle schools. We just want to hear you get up here and make a shout and hallelujah and a thank you, Jesus. And my hope for the black church is that we will preach and proclaim the total gospel of Jesus Christ that wants us to be total and complete beings, and not just the ones who preach what pleases the people in the pew. Because, sir, ma'am, I realize that you don't come to church to hear about, preventing sexually transmitted disease. And I understand you don't come to church to hear about less salt, less fat, less sugar in your diet. But the truth of the matter is Jesus came to give you life and life more abundantly. And there are practices that we have in our own lives that cut ourselves short from the promise that Jesus Christ came to give us, right? And so when you first opened up the whole idea about health prevention, it is a critical part, in my opinion, about the rhetoric that we use about how we help our people be mentally and spiritually well, but also physically well. The way we eat, the way we exercise or don't exercise, the way we engage in sexual activities or don't engage in sexual activities. Those are all a part of our lives as spiritual beings and physical beings, and I think should be a part of our conversation.
And when you look at the symbolism between the marriage relationships, for example, and the church and the Lord, the bride of Christ, look at that symbolism. So that symbolizes not only relationship, but it symbolizes intimacy. But yet we don't want to talk about intimacy. But there's not too much that separates sexuality and spirituality. But we don't want to talk about it. And that's interesting. As the church, we don't deal with it. As the church, we don't tell folk that you can't put that fat back in those greens. It's not good for you. Or maybe you need to leave those chitlins alone. I just made about 40 people mad. All right? But we don't...
Moderation, man. You got to talk about moderation, Reverend.
See, I threw a rock and it hit somebody. But anyway, y'all get my point. But now let's close this down. We've gone over time, but this conversation is needed. For those of you who are watching us, within the next week, we're going to put this up on our YouTube channel. It'll also be repeated on this network, so you have a chance to see this again. But we needed to have this dialogue, and periodically we'll talk about different issues and areas of the church where we can critique it while at the same time we can affirm it, because we have to do both. But what I want to do in this segment is give each of you a chance to tell us what you're doing. We're going to start with the great Dr. Earle Fisher on the phone. If he can tell us what he's doing, then we'll go to the Reverend Janae, great Dr. Pitts Murdock. She can tell us what she's doing, and then we'll end with the great teacher of theologs over here. Okay, so Earle, go right ahead. Tell us what you're doing real quick.
Now, let me thank you again for Black Thought, man. I think it's a relevant outlet in the African American community, and you talk about some relevant issues, so I hope that we can support that. I personally am just trying to continue to merge the academy and the church at a real grassroots level. So you can meet me at Abyssinian 3890 Mill Branch in Whitehaven on Sundays and on Wednesdays, and I am also teaching some contemporary theology courses at Rhodes College. And preferably, if the Lord says the same, I look to be in a PhD program. I'm actually auditing a course now, or at least trying to audit a course now at the University of Memphis, in the same program that Dr. Andre Johnson was in. I told him I was going to be like him when I grow up, so maybe I'm growing up just a little bit. But also keep your eyes and your ears open for the Southern Action Coalition. I'm sure Janae and Andre both can talk more about that, but we are trying to make sure that we can put a collective cadre of voices together that represent a more multifaceted and diverse representation of the Black church. So those are some of the things that I'm doing. And check out the Pastor and the Professor on YouTube too.
All right, go right ahead.
Thank you again. It's always good to be in the presence of great thoughts and great minds. I am enjoying life. I am expecting baby number 2. My husband and I are will be welcoming our second son in February. Jeffrey Allen Murdock Jr., I love you.
Oh, Lord, we saw that flow. We saw that flow in the camera. Camera started melting when Kiki going.
But I am really enjoying this season of life that I'm in now. I am finishing up another degree, wrapping up an MBA at the University of Memphis. And, you know, that's on the academic side. The most fun that I'm having is consulting churches. I've gained a tremendous amount of insight, having served at one of the largest mega churches here in Memphis, Mississippi Boulevard Christian Church, having served in Detroit at Triumph Church, which is now the #1 fastest growing church in the country. I served there before I moved to Memphis. But even the relationships that I have with pastors and churches across the country, I have gained a wealth of insight on ministry development, organization, staff development, and also I'm able to balance the business perspectives. How do you have a sound fiscal budget? How do you have effective stewardship practices? And how do you manage the financial and business sides of your church while also honoring the gifting and the call that God has placed on you? So I'm having great fun doing that. I'm also having great fun preaching every week. These days, my Sundays are open, and I get a chance to travel, and I get a chance to preach not only around Memphis but across the country. So that has been tremendously rewarding as well. So I look forward to the doors that God is opening in my life, and look forward to working more closely with this brother over here in the Netters program at Memphis Theological Seminary. So that's me.
And she is a preacher.
All right.
She is guilty.
Thank you.
All right, go right ahead, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Hutchinson, for this forum and this opportunity to come and to share. Just a couple of things. Reverend Janae mentioned about the Netter Certificate Program over at MTS. Classes start tonight. The new term starts tonight, so if you're interested in coming to take in your building, your ministry class, or tomorrow, the one I'm teaching, Outreach and Mission, come on tonight or tomorrow. We will take your application at 168 East Parkway, Memphis Theological Seminary. Just get on the campus. We're real easy to find. I also serve as pastor, as I mentioned earlier, Gifts of Life Ministries. Right now, we're worshiping at 1542 Jackson, and we are about to start this Sunday a new worshiping community at 11 o'clock at Caritas Village, a restaurant on 2509 Harvard. A new way of doing ministry. It should be fun. It should be exciting. It's a new mission group that we are starting there, so come on out to that if you like. Book just dropped about a month ago, Urban God Talk, constructing a hip-hop spirituality. You can go to Amazon and just click on the the lower price to get the best price, okay, of the book. I have copies, of course, of the book as well, too. Urban God Talk, talking about how there is a spirituality and a theological paradigm even within hip-hop culture. And we're excited about that as well. And just doing the teaching and writing, and hopefully by the end of the year, hopefully and prayerfully, we'll get another book out that's going to be an e-book on church, on being the church.
Well, you see, we did not ask people who were not busy to be on this show. They're busy in their own right. They're doing tangible and fruitful ministry in their own right.
Oh, let me say this too. I love you, Lisa Jones Johnson.
You got to get it in. You got to get it in. Right.
And look, and the lovely Denise right here, shotgun the whole while.
You might as well come on, man.
Eddie, take the cameras off now for a minute. I need the. We about to end anyway. Put the yeah, thank you. With all this love floating in there, let me say, and I know that she's watching. The love of my life, Rebecca Medlock Hutchinson. Do love you. You support me. I appreciate it. You know, all these folk flowing this love everywhere, but you know I got you. But anyway, let's bring the folk. But actually, that's good to see all this love. It's getting all on my lapels. It's flowing everywhere. But anyway, on a serious note, I'm glad that all of you were here. Glad that we were able to engage you by phone. Brother Fisher, thank you all so much. It's time to go. I hope this conversation has blessed you. It's time for me to go. And as I always do, brother man, sister woman, young boy, young girl, put your mind in gear and put your thinking cap on. Peace.